Good morning, Sean. You there?
Good morning. Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Having completed our third Category 4 auction, we're going to now proceed to our regularly scheduled meeting. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. And as always, I'm asking people to put their electronic devices on silent so they don't disturb the proceedings. With us today, Michael Smith, representing Russell Redding from the Department of Agriculture, Jennifer Langen, representing Joe Torcella, the State Treasurer, and Bob Coyne, representing Dan Hassel, Secretary of the Department of Revenue. Thank you all for being here. Due to the rescheduling of this meeting because of weather conditions, Commissioner Knodel will not be participating today, and Commissioner Logan is back in Pittsburgh joining us by telephone. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay. A quorum of the board being present, I'll call these proceedings to order. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we have one public hearing scheduled regarding Sands Beth Works petition to approve a reconfiguration of its gaming floor. Can we have the Sands representatives come forward, please? And as always, before we begin, I'd ask everyone who's going to speak today, please state and spell their name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. I'd also ask that any potential non-attorney witness please stand at this time and be sworn in. Missing court reporter.
We're going to start.
Okay, very good. Please proceed. Identify yourselves. Spell and state your name.
Sure. Kathy McCracken, Kathy McCracken, Executive Vice President, Marketing and Operations.
Michael Magazoo, Michael Magazzu, Vice President and General Counsel.
Michael Vinci, Michael Vinci, Vice President of Finance.
Brian Carr, Carr, President and Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you. Can we swear these witnesses at this time? How do we do that?
You can swear.
I can do it. Fine.
All right.
What the heck? We'll do things differently every day. You swear and affirm that your testimony today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a first.
It's a first for us, too.
Okay. You may begin, Sands, who's ever.
Mike, you would like to kick it off?
Yeah, just give a brief introduction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you noted, we are here today in support of our petition that we recently filed for the amendment of our operating plan from OP22 to OP23. The essence of OP23 is to, one, move our existing poker area, which currently resides near the middle of our casino floor, into what is a more enclosed area that used to be the Carnegie Deli, which is, for the most part, more of a four-wall poker room. It also would include backfilling the area where poker currently exists with a combination of slot machines, traditional banking tables, and electronic wagering terminals, or EWTs. I'd also like to emphasize that the reason that we are here today for a personal appearance rather than this petition being handled by delegated authority is because, pursuant to state law, if a casino operator in Pennsylvania wants to apply to exceed 250 table games, we are required to make a personal appearance such as this one. And I want to emphasize that because we're very proud of that. Our table games business is, we're an industry leader in that area. And we think that this is a good day for the gaming industry in Pennsylvania and for Sands Bethlehem. So, again, we're really proud of that. And with that, we have a brief presentation, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Carr to take you through that presentation and justify why we believe that this proposal should be approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. We'll give you a quick overview that Mike kind of already touched on. So for almost 9 years, Las Vegas Sands has really enjoyed working with the PGCB to bring world-class gaming to the state of Pennsylvania. Over the last few years, dating back to 2014, we've really made a real push to continue to emphasize the improvements in our amenities and continue to drive the growth that Mike's talking about and really what has led us to the point where we are right now. So over the last few years, we've spent $26 million updating our slot and table product on the floor. We've introduced stadium baccarat and roulette and blackjack ETGs last year. We renovated our hotel for 282 rooms and created the Chairman's Suites and Chairman's Lounge, which puts us on par with anything you would find in Atlantic City or any other resort destination from that point. We renovated new restaurant offerings where we brought in Buddy V's, we brought in Carlos Bakery, rebranded it as Emerald's Fish House, and just finished the renovation of Emerald's Chop House. We employ 2,464 employees in our building, most of which are PA residents, so something we're very proud of and looking forward to continue on that success. The next slide just quickly shows you the gaming revenue growth that we've experienced since 2014. We're up 16.1% in that time, and just to give reference, the rest of the state without us is up 3.2%. So the work that we've done in this time has really helped us see the benefit and has benefited the state to that point, as we now pay more than $200 million annually in gaming tax to the state. So page 4 is just a quick overview of why it is that we're here. So we are here, as Mike said, for the approval of OP23, which relocates our poker area into the Carnegie space and creates a true poker room. It also backfills that existing area with additional slots, tables, and EWTs, which have really started to catch on for us. And as Mike also said, this would take us over the 250, which is why we're here for a personal appearance. The following pages will just kind of take you through a little bit more detail about this. So this expansion is about a $4 million capital improvement. We relocate the poker area into the Carnegie Deli. I would like to note for the board that when we closed Carnegie Deli just after the first of the year, we had 42 employees in there. We were successful at relocating 41 of them into other jobs within the building. I'm very proud of that. So 26 tables will move into the new area. That really isn't much of a negative hit from a gaming point of view because we really had all 27 open at any time. So this is better utilization of space for us. And the backfilling existing poker area is listed below. We will pick up 74 additional slot machines, taking our number up to 3,053. We'll add 14 bank tables. We'll add 29 EWTs. And then poker table, like I said, goes down 1. But your table games equivalent moves from 247 to 265, hence the need for us to come in for this meeting. And then the gaming floor square footage will then eclipse 150,000 square feet. We're very excited about that. Number 6 is just a quick overview of what this does headcount-wise for us. So as I said, we have 2,464 employees right now. We anticipate that this adjustment will result in 75 additional jobs for us, taking our total up over 2,500 jobs on property. A couple renderings for you to look at. This is a rendering of what the outside of the building looks like. If you're familiar with Carnegie, a lot of that woodwork and everything on the outside will remain, so it's very aesthetically pleasing to the property and fits in nicely. This is just a brief overview of what the floor looks like and how the 26 games fit into the area, and a rendering of what it looks like inside the room. From another angle, you can see this, and then from this spot, you can see the arrival experience, which will be significantly better than the one we have now. There'll be TVs behind it that will both show sporting events, but we'll also have wait lists and also a much better experience for the check-in process for us to make sure that our players have a high-end experience when they come to play poker with us. This next picture is a little bit tough to see, but it's just a brief overview. This is the backfill space, and to give you some reference of where it is, the larger clouded-in area down below is where the poker room physically sits right now. What this allows us to do is backfill the space with the slots, the tables, and then you can see a realignment of an existing pit above that will allow us to finish off that blackjack stadium gaming area that we have, which has really shown some tremendous progress since we were here for you last year as we introduced that product. In closing, Sands Bethlehem and Las Vegas Sands looks to continue the recent trends by continuing to innovate and provide exciting new experiences for our guests, and we respectfully request that you approve OP23. And my team and I are here for any questions that you have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Enforcement Council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's Michael Rowland, ROL A&D, with the Office of Enforcement Council. Just a few brief questions. A substantial portion of OP23 is moving the gaming floor, or making a gaming floor, into what used to be Carnegie Deli. I believe you've put forth today that 41 of those employees have been relocated. Can you give us a little bit of a flavor about how those positions are going to be utilized, or where will they go?
Several of them stayed within food and beverage. They went to other food and beverage restaurants we did have some people cross into slots and move into other areas. I think one of the things that's most exciting about this industry for a lot of our team members is the ability to branch out and take your career in different directions. So we have several examples of that. And if the board wants specifics, it'd be very easy to go through and give a listing of where exactly everyone went.
Okay, so would it be accurate to say that the 75 new positions that you set forth on slide 6, those are in addition to the relocation of the 41 from Carnegie Deli?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to draw your attention to slide 5, please. And this is just a little bit of clarification. I'm looking at the chart, and this is underneath the additions column. First, looking at what would be the EWTs, you have a blank section. Is it safe to say there should be 29 in there? Will there be 29 units?
There are. When we were going through the iterations, we were concerned about confusion because of the equivalence on that. So, yes, it is 29 if you were to go for actual physical terminals, yes.
Okay, and then just below that, even though it is in the additions column, you have the number 1, which is in parentheses. The reason it's in parentheses is because that's actually a subtraction, not an addition.
Correct, and it's reflected in what the final total is on the right is.
Okay, this proposal changes the shape of the gaming floor a little bit, and it's going to have some impact on what is labeled as the underage pathway. How does Sands plan on addressing that issue and ensure that underage patrons don't gain access to the floor?
Well, I think we've made tremendous strides in the last few years, especially since we implemented the Veridox system for gaining the entry and working on that. We will continue to work with both the board and also with our security team to ensure that process continues to work. And we're very pleased with where we've gotten to, but there's always opportunity for improvement. We'll continue to work on it.
And if adopted by the board, OP23 adds approximately 4,800 square feet to Sands gaming floor. How will that addition impact the overall square footage of both the smoking and non-smoking sections of the floor?
Mike, do you want to talk to that?
Both areas will increase. I know the exact numbers are in the petition, and I know that the smoking areas will remain under the 50% threshold. But I know that both smoking and non-smoking areas will increase along with the overall increase because of the move of poker into Carnegie.
If I told you the difference was about 43 square feet, does that sound accurate? I mean, they're pretty close, correct?
Yes, that would sound about right, yes.
And if the board approves OP23 today, how quickly do you plan on starting the proposed configuration, and when do you anticipate its completion?
So we have already started demolition in the Carnegie area in anticipation of this. Right now, we are on path for somewhere mid to late March that the poker room would relocate into the new space, and then the backfill would be done sometime in April with an absolute end of date being at the very end of April.
Mr. Chairman, that's all we have as far as questions. We actually don't have a formal presentation today. We would just ask at the end to be given an opportunity to make a final closing statement if that's possible.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board about this proposal? I have one. Where do I get a corned beef sandwich now?
You can still get that in our Steelworks offering.
Same quality? You
Exact-
promised me.
Not only same quality, the
Same
exact same
product.
vendor and everything, same
All
product.
right, okay.
I got you covered.
It's actually listed on their menu that way as Carnegie special.
Okay.
Our customers would want that too, so.
Okay. Any further comments from Sands at this point?
Just one last comment to express our gratitude for the board staff. We know how busy the board staff regularly is, and even more so with the onset of all of the new areas of gaming and everything that goes into that. And so we recognize that this petition got onto the agenda in short order, and we would be remiss if we didn't express our thanks to the board staff for doing that for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland? Yes.
Just a very brief statement. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to SANS Operational Plan 23. Section 13A11 of the Act permits Category 1 or Category 2 licensees to increase their table game allotment above the 250 maximum set forth in the Act 6 months after table games operation has commenced. SANS is well beyond that 6-month requirement, and inside its physical structure can easily withstand the proposed increase of table games without inconveniencing the public attending the facility. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is of the opinion that SANS has proven success with table games in Commonwealth. Permitting SANS to increase their table game allowance would improve the customer experience by increasing both the variety and number of games available. Additionally, the proposal should increase tax paid to the Commonwealth, which would ultimately benefit all Pennsylvanians through the addition of property tax relief. Finally, the proposal creates and makes available an additional 75 jobs for the surrounding community. Simply approved by the board, approval is made subject to the 20 conditions set forth in our January 25th, 2018 answer. I believe SANS has had the opportunity to review those conditions, and it's my understanding they have no objections.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Is
We
that
have
it
nothing
then?
further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll be voting on this a little later this morning.
Thank you.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session on Tuesday, February 6th to discuss personnel matters and to discuss quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that are going to be considered by the board today. Additionally, I'd like to announce that the next Category 4 casino license auction will be held on February 21st at 10 a.m. in this room. As was the case today, board staff will conduct that auction. Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the December 13th meeting. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcript of the December 13, 2017 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Under new business, we'll hear from Administrative Director Claire Yantis at this point. Morning, Claire.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 2 individuals. First, Ms. Lashee James has been selected as a casino compliance representative in the Bureau of Casino Compliance assigned to the Sands Casino and is recommended for hire by Bureau Director Jerry Stoll. Second, as the Administrative Director, I recommend Ms. Danette Bixler-George be hired as the agency's Director of Human Resources. Both individuals have completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening. Unless you have any questions, I ask the board consider a motion to hire Ms. James and Ms. Bixler-George as indicated.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants as proposed by the Administrative Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank
you, Claire. Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first 2 agenda items relate to temporary regulation packages. Assistant Chief Counsel Laura Bird is here to present the first of those.
Good morning. The Office of Chief Counsel presents for the board's consideration temporary regulation number 125-210. This temporary rulemaking consists of licensing provisions covering interactive gaming manufacturers, interactive gaming suppliers, interactive gaming service providers, and all category of individuals seeking to participate in interactive gaming in the Commonwealth. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this packet of regulatory material. If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve this temporary regulation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt temporary regulation number 125-210 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board is temporary regulation 125-211. This temporary rulemaking will provide the regulatory oversight structure for the conduct of video gaming at licensed truck stop establishments in the Commonwealth. The rulemaking implements Part 3 of Act 42 of 2017 and provides truck stops which meet certain eligibility criteria the option of providing up to 5 video gaming terminals operated by a terminal operator within a designated area of the truck stop establishment. The regulation package provides for the licensing of the persons and entities who may have responsibilities for video gaming, as well as establishes the board's rules and requirements for the testing and possession of video gaming terminals, the accounting and internal control standards, restrictions on licensees, addresses compulsive and problem gambling, self-exclusion, and board-imposed mandatory exclusion. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the regulatory package. Otherwise, I'd request a motion to adopt it.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Thank you. I would just ask Chief Counsel to elaborate a little bit in terms for the public to understand where we are with temporary regulations, what happens between then and proposed regulations, and then also if both this one and with the other one, which was just approved, where those will be publicized after the board.
Sure. Great question. I'll try to say with that order. The General Assembly has the ability to provide temporary rulemaking authority to an agency, generally in connection with new legislation where the intent is to get the program up and running in an expeditious manner, much like we've seen since 2004 on with respect to new gaming offerings. What this does is it allows us to come out with the rulemakings, put them into effect without going through the full independent regulatory review process in the first instance. So what happens is the board has adopted, for instance, the package on video gaming terminals now. Those will be submitted to the Legislative Reference Bureau, who will publish the regulations in the Pennsylvania Bulletin, and they become effective upon publication. We also will accept public comment during this period that these regulations are in effect, and proceed to operate under the regulations with the understanding that this package is good for 2 years. We then will reintroduce the regulations as proposed regulations. They'll go to the Attorney General for a review. They'll go to the standing committees of the legislature for review. They'll again be published and again for public comment. What it allows us to do really is to get this industry up and running, and it gives us a little bit of time to see how the experience is before we actually go into the final rulemaking process. And if we need to tweak the regs in a certain way, we can. If we find they're working perfectly the way we expected, then they'll move forward in that vein. But again, the regs get published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. We'll also publish them on our website, and we send them out to the interested stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one comment. I just want to express my appreciation on behalf of the board of the work that's been done by staff here to get us, given the time constraints we're operating, to get us up to speed, and it appears we're on track to be able to fully implement the will of the General Assembly, and that's due to the hard work of a lot of other people in this room. And on behalf of the board, I just want to express our appreciation for the hard work being done here.
Thank you.
Having said that, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt temporary regulation number 125-211 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Today, the board has one petition before it for consideration, and that petition is Sands Bethworks Gaming's LLC's request for approval of a reconfiguration of the gaming floor as described in Operating Plan 23. This is the matter that you just heard a very short time ago during the public hearing, and it will have the result, among other things, of increasing the number of table games at the Sands facility from 247 to 265. If the board's inclined to grant the relief, it is requested that the approval be subject to the majority of the conditions outlined in OEC's answer. Additionally, Sands has requested that the exhibits to their petition be maintained as confidential, and OEC does not object. The Office of Chief Counsel concurs in the request and therefore suggests it would be appropriate to have a motion to approve the reconfiguration.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve Sands Bethworks Gaming LLC's petition to seek a reconfiguration of the gaming floor, as well as its request that certain documents be maintained as confidential with conditions requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning.
Morning.
The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals, or in one case an entity: Jerome J. Hanley, TechArt Inc., Arthur Miller, Bruce Cusins, Ronald Miller, Russell Isaacs, Joseph Miller, Gary Miller, Marcia Miller, Robert Del Rossi, Zaletta Wyatt, Alan Lefevre, Anthony Watson, and Michael Chambrello. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objections to any of these withdrawals or surrenders, and as a result, if the board were inclined to grant these requests, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of the requesters, and the matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 4 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, as well as the complete evidentiary record, have been provided to the board prior to today's meeting. Additionally, in each case, the person that is subject to the report and recommendation have been advised that the matter would be taken up by the board today and that they could come forward and briefly address the board. If any of these persons are present and wish to address the board, they should come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation pertains to Kimberly Hadley. In May of 2017, Ms. Hadley submitted a gaming employee permit application seeking work as a security guard at the Sugar House Casino. On July 20th, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice recommending denial of Ms. Hadley's application based upon numerous criminal convictions and her arrearage to the Commonwealth for fines and costs related to those convictions. Ms. Hadley's criminal record spanned from 1992 through 2000 and included felony convictions for burglary, forgery, access device fraud, as well as several misdemeanor thefts. The hearing in this matter was held, as requested by Ms. Hadley, on October 11th, 2017. Ms. Hadley did not attend that hearing, and as a result, the only evidence put into the record was that put in by Enforcement Counsel showing the convictions and the prior criminal history. And as a result, the recommendation of the hearing officer before the board today is that Ms. Hadley's application be denied.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Kimberly Hadley's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board pertains to Gaston Maxey's petition to be removed from the board's involuntary exclusion list. By way of background, in January of 2013, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Maxey on the exclusion list for cheating. Specifically, while playing table games at Sands, he added additional chips to his existing wagers after the dealer had signaled that no additional wagers would be permitted. As a result of these actions, on June 26, 2013, the board placed Mr. Magsky on the involuntary exclusion list. He was also charged criminally and pled guilty to misdemeanor disorderly conduct. In August of 2017, 4 years after placement on the list, Mr. Magsky filed his request for removal from the list. A hearing in this matter was held on October 18, 2017. Mr. Magsky appeared at the hearing and testified in his own behalf through an interpreter, as he is a native of Syria who emigrated to the United States in 2012 and does not speak English. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared at the hearing offering testimony documentary evidence. The testimony presented included evidence that during December of 2015, while on the board's exclusion list, Mr. Magsky was on the gaming floor at Mount Airy. He was charged with defiant trespass for that conduct and pled guilty to that offense. At the hearing, Mr. Magsky testified that he added to his bets, as alleged in the original action, to place him on the exclusion list, but only because he didn't understand the rules of the game, and the dealer didn't indicate to him that he was doing anything wrong. He also admitted to visiting Mount Airy in December of 2015, stating that he was unsure if he was on the exclusion list from all Pennsylvania casinos or only Sands. And he additionally testified that he has applied for numerous jobs and has been unable to secure employment, as several temporary agencies for which he sought employment through have told him that his placement on the list was identified as a problem in his obtaining employment. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer's recommendation is that Mr. Magsky, having served 4.5 years on the list, and the evidence of his misunderstanding and his employment issues amount to extreme circumstances which would allow the board to remove him from the list, and that's the recommendation before the board.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Ghassan Magsky's petition for removal from the PGCB's involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Denise Nurka's report and recommendation recommending approval of her non-gaming employee registration application. In May of 2017, Ms. Nurka submitted her application seeking work as a housekeeper at the hotel at the Mohegan Sun Pocono property. On July 11, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice of recommendation of denial of this application based upon Ms. Nurka's criminal record and her arrearage and restitution and costs related to that record. Specifically, the evidence showed that in December of 2004, Ms. Nurka was charged with 22 felony counts of theft by unlawful taking and 22 felony counts of forgery after she wrote 22 checks belonging to her prior employer, making them payable to herself or cash. The total amount at issue was over $22,000. She ultimately pled guilty to one count of theft by unlawful taking and served 12 months probation. A hearing in this matter was held on September 27, 2017. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Ms. Nurka also appeared and testified on her own behalf, putting evidence that since her release from probation, she's become involved in church, her daughter's basketball program, and has adopted one of her grandchildren, was in the process of adopting a second child, and also served as a kinship caregiver at the Luzerne County Children and Youth Services Department. After taking all the evidence into consideration, the recommendation issued by the hearing officer was that Ms. Nurka's application be approved, given the amount of time has passed and the positive steps she has taken in her life, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Denise Nurka's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board pertains to Bakash Suba's petition for early reapplication for a gaming employee occupation permit. In March of 2016, Mr. Suba filed a renewal application for a gaming employee occupation permit, as he was currently holding one and was working as a table games dealer at Presque Isle. On August 24th, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice of recommendation of denial of this renewal application based on Mr. Suba's failure to comply with numerous requests to provide his 2014 federal income tax return as part of his renewal application. In November of 2016, based on this noncompliance, the board denied Mr. Suba's renewal application. 8 months later, on July 31st of 2017, Mr. Suba filed a request for early reapplication of his gaming employee occupation permit. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement again attempted to work with Mr. Suba to have him submit the missing tax return. He failed to comply, and as a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an objection to his request for early reapplication. Mr. Suba requested a hearing, which was held on October 17th, 2017. He did not appear at that hearing. As a result, he put on no evidence. The tax return requested was never put into given to the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, and ultimately the hearing officer recommends that because of that, the application be denied.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding Bakash Suba's petition for early reapplication for a gaming employee occupational permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters of the Office of Chief
Thank you very much. Sean Hannon, Manager of the Bureau of Licensing.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Before the board today will be one slot machine and table game manufacturer renewal, one slot machine and table game manufacturer designee renewal, and 812 principal, key, gaming, and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 2 gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the slot machine and table game manufacturer license for Novomatic Gaming Industries GmbH, which is an Austrian-based company that manufactures slot machines and electronic table games. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of this company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability reports for the applicant. I have provided you with the draft order for this entity and ask the board consider the order to renew the slot machine and table game manufacturer licenses.
Thank you.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Novomatic Gaming Industries GmbH slot machine and table games manufacturer license renewal as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is the renewal of the slot machine and table game manufacturer designee licenses for Novomatic America Sales LLC. Novomatic America Sales LLC is an Illinois-based company that sells and services gaming equipment for their parent company, Novomatic Gaming Industries GmbH. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of this company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report for the applicant. I have provided you with the draft order for this entity and ask the board consider the order to renew the slot machine and table game manufacturer designee licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Novomatic America Sales LLC's slot machine and table games manufacturer designee license renewal as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is the approval of principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 18 principals and 7 key employee licenses. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is adopted.
Next are temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of the temporary licenses for 3 principals and 7 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 534 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 197 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving this order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
One second.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. I move that the board approve the issuance of the gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, there are recommendations of denial for 3 gaming employee applicants and 1 non-gaming employee applicant. In each case, the applicant was notified he or she was being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
This was the denial. Okay. I'm not clear. One moment, please.
Yeah, we just someone switched them, but yeah, Barrett's got issues. Yeah. Yep.
May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, for your consideration are withdrawal requests for gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 40 gaming employees and 2 key employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the withdrawal of key employee and gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 2 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you, Sean. Next up, Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 21 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 1 consent agreement, 6 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 12 involuntary exclusions. The first matter on the agenda for the Office of Enforcement Counsel is for the board's consideration of a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Downs Racing LP, doing business as Mohegan Sun Pocono. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel John Crow. Representative Mr. Epps is here on behalf of Mohegan Sun Pocono, and at this time, you're an attorney. Mr. Epps is a licensed attorney in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so therefore I would ask that Mr. Crow proceed after Mr. Epps introduces himself for the record.
And just for the record, I probably should be sworn. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania, but not. But I'm inactive, so I'll be sworn.
Thank you.
I do. Michael Epps, EPPS, on behalf of Mohegan Sun Pocono. I am Vice President of Legal and Compliance.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. John Crowe, CROHE for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement reached between Mohegan Sun Pocono and the Office of Enforcement Counsel regarding a self-excluded patron violation. On August 5th, 2017, a self-excluded person successfully obtained a cash advance from Mohegan Sun Pocono in the amount of $400. This individual requested voluntary self-exclusion from gaming activities on July 15th, 2012 for a period of 1 year, and since then has never requested to be removed from the self-exclusion list. The cash advance that he received was processed at the Mohegan Sun Pocono by a Players Club supervisor. After receiving the cash advance, the self-excluded person gamed at a Spanish 21 table game for approximately 23 minutes before attempting to obtain a second cash advance. During the process of requesting the second cash advance, Mohegan Sun Pocono personnel discovered that the individual was on the self-exclusion list, and as a result, the individual was escorted to the on-site Pennsylvania State Police Office. The self-excluded individual was charged with criminal trespass by the Pennsylvania State Police. However, this charge was later dismissed. The self-excluded individual did not possess any winnings from gaming. As a result, no funds were confiscated. The Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mohegan Sun Pocono respectfully request that this board approve the consent agreement and stipulations of settlement that Mohegan Sun pay a civil penalty of $7,500 as well as $2,500 for costs incurred by the board staff in connection with their investigations into this matter.
Thank you. Any comments from Downs?
If I can, just that even since this incident happened, our new Vice President of Marketing has come on board, and this is all part of the transition to right size and correct get our ship in line and get on the right course. And our Vice President of Marketing, Erica Tessier, has done a tremendous job of changing her staff, reinforcing the policies and procedures, the standard operating procedures, and making certain that everybody is aware and keeping in compliance with those things. So, again, I don't think that you will be seeing us for these things very often. I don't want to jinx it, but
no offense, we'd be happy not to see you for one.
A lot of you lately.
Too much.
Fine. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Downs Racing LP as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you for coming.
The next 8 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of 6 gaming employee occupation permits and the suspension of 1 gaming employee occupation permit and 1 non-gaming registration, which were issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days, as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named person. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Sarah Kolasar, Kolesar, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Kem Dahal for being arrested and criminally charged with 2 misdemeanor offenses that stemmed from cheating while playing poker at the Meadows Casino. Mr. Dahal was employed at the Rivers Casino at the time this incident occurred and was terminated as a result of this incident. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Kem Dahal.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Kem DeHall's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for revocation involving Jason Whitley. Mr. Whitley was employed as a table games dealer at Parks Casino and permitted as a gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint on September 29, 2017 to revoke Mr. Whitley's gaming employee permit after he was caught stealing chips from poker players and also the casino while working at Parks Casino. Mr. Whitley was criminally charged with theft and receiving stolen property for his actions. The Office of Enforcement Counsel asked the board to revoke Jason Whitley's gaming employee occupation permit at this time.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Jason Whitley's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, TEPPER, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Stephen Margison. Mr. Margison colluded with the patron to steal money from Mount Airy by paying out wagers to losing hands, not collecting losing wagers, and overpaying winning wagers. Mr. Margison also paid patrons who were sitting at the table on losing hands in hopes that they would not report his illegal activity. Through his illegal activity, Mr. Margison caused a total loss to Mount Airy and the Commonwealth of approximately $16,575. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit of Stephen Margison.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Stephen Margison's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Alex Dang. While employed as a dealer at Mount Airy, Mr. Dang physically assaulted his supervisor while in an employee-only area. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board issue an order suspending the gaming employee permit of Alex Dang for at least 1 year.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Alex Dang's gaming employee occupation permit for the remainder of the term of his permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, Ferrell. Next matter for your consideration is a complaint for revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Hamid Karim. On June 14, 2017, Mr. Karim, while on duty as a security officer, received a cell phone from another Harris security officer, which was to be placed in the lost and found. Mr. Karim kept the cell phone rather than place it in the lost and found, as required by his job duties as a security officer. Mr. Karim did not return the cell phone until being questioned by the Pennsylvania State Police. No charges were filed against Mr. Karim. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order revoking the gaming employee permit issued to Hamid Karim.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Hamid Karim's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a complaint for revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Raymond Wani. Between July 9, 2017 and August 8, 2017, Mr. Wani stole $2,305 from Harris, Philadelphia, while performing his job duties as a cage cashier. On August 9, 2017, the Pennsylvania State Police arrested Mr. Wani and charged him with 1 felony count and 2 misdemeanor counts of theft by unlawful taking and 3 misdemeanor counts of receiving stolen property. On August 22, 2017, the 3 counts of receiving stolen property were withdrawn. The remaining charges remain pending. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order revoking the gaming employee permit issued to Raymond Wani.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Raymond Wani's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Morning again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Michael Rowland with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter is a request to revoke the non-gaming employee registration of Damian Allen. Mr. Allen held the position of warehouse supervisor at Sands Casino. In November of 2017, the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General and the Bethlehem City Police Department executed a search warrant at Mr. Allen's residence. At least one computer and one external storage device containing child pornography were seized from his residence. Mr. Allen confirmed to the police that he resided in the residence alone and that the computer and external storage device seized were his property. He was charged with 100 counts of possession of child pornography and 1 count of criminal use of a communication facility. The charges are pending. Mr. Allen is currently not employed by any casino or licensee in the Commonwealth, and the matter is now before the board to consider the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration of Damian Allen.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Damian Allen's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter is a request to revoke the gaming employee occupation permit of Yi Huang. Ms. Huang held a position of dealer at Sands Casino over the course of several days in July of 2017. While performing her duties as a dealer, Ms. Huang assisted several patrons with cheating while they played midi baccarat. It was determined that there were at least 32 events involving Ms. Huang and patrons, with Sands losing an approximate total of $8,400. Ms. Huang admitted to assisting the patrons and offered to pay whatever restitution was owed. Therefore, no criminal charges were filed. Ms. Huang is currently not employed by any casino or any licensee in the Commonwealth, and the matter is now before the board to consider the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit of Yi Huang.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Yi Wong's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In an effort to correct the record, there were 7 revocations and 1 suspension, as opposed to what was previously stated.
Okay. Thank you.
Moving on, the remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted, all documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
Next is a request to place Yi Huang on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Chairman, the request to place Ms. Huang is based on the same fact pattern that was just given to the board considering her revocation. Unless you have any questions or the members of the board have any questions, we just ask that the matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Yi Huang on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Yi Huang to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Jin-Di Chen on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Chen, in collusion with dealer Yi Huang, cheated multiple times at Sands Casino while playing midi baccarat. Ms. Chen profited $2,815 from her illegal activities. Ms. Chen paid full restitution and was permitted to exit the casino without being criminally charged. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Jin-Di Chen on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jin-Di Chen to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Jorge Lopez on the involuntary exclusion list. In August of 2017, Mr. Lopez capped and pinched his bets a total of 19 times while playing Texas Hold'em at Sands Casino. He benefited $250 from his illegal activity, $75 in restitution was recovered, and Mr. Lopez was not criminally charged. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Jorge Lopez on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Jorge Lopez to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Jose Ortega on the involuntary exclusion list. In October of 2017, Mr. Ortega physically struck and knocked unconscious another patron while on the gaming floor at Sands Casino. Mr. Ortega was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with simple assault and harassment. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Jose Ortega on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jose Ortega to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for a period of 1 year, at which time his name shall be removed from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Sergio Luis Sanchez Roman on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Sanchez Roman, while performing his duties as a dealer, assisted several patrons with cheating at Sands Casino while they played blackjack. Additionally, he incorrectly acted on dealer toke bets. There were 21 events involving Mr. Sanchez Roman with 3 patrons, causing Sands to lose a total of $2,275. Mr. Sanchez Roman admitted to assisting the patrons. He was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with prohibited acts under our Gaming Act and theft by unlawful taking or disposition. The disposition is unreported. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Sergio Luis Sanchez Roman on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Sergio Luis Sanchez Roman to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Shatari Winston on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Winston left her 3 children unattended in her vehicle, which was parked in Sands parking garage for approximately 1 hour and 11 minutes while she gamed. The children were ages 10 and 1-year-old twins. Ms. Winston was charged by the Bethlehem City Police Department with 3 counts of endangering the welfare of children. She entered a negotiated guilty plea to 1 count of endangering the welfare of children, and the remaining 2 were withdrawn. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Shatari Winston on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Shatari Winston to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. Can somebody just tell me the length that she'll be on the exclusion list?
It'd be 5 years or until she petitions unless she petitions for early removal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then after that 5-year period, she still has to petition to come off. So,
Gotcha. Thank you.
Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of
Pardon.
Enforcement Counsel.
Before we proceed, could we just stand at ease for a minute? Be right back. For the delay, let's proceed, please.
Thank you. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving John R. Tardino. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Tardino on the exclusion list on October 6, 2017, after he was cited for a defiant trespass at Parks Casino on May 10, 2017. Mr. Tardino had previously been permanently evicted from Parks Casino. The May 7, 2017 incident at Parks Casino was Mr. Tardino's 11th incident at Pennsylvania casinos. Mr. Tardino pleaded guilty to the charge on June 5, 2017. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place John R. Tardino on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of John R. Tardino to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Gabriel A. Williams. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Williams on the exclusion list on September 28, 2017, due to an incident whereby Mr. Williams was found in possession of methamphetamine at Parks Casino. Mr. Williams was criminally charged with intentional possession of a controlled substance by a person not registered by Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Gabriel A. Williams on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Gabriel A. Williams to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
I have a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next two items on the agenda consist of one fact pattern, so if it pleases the board, I will address both instances as one. As previously mentioned, Stephen Margison, while working as a dealer at Mount Airy, colluded with the patron, Dion Lister, to steal money from Mount Airy by paying out wagers to losing hands, not collecting losing wagers, and overpaying winning hands to Mr. Lister. As a result of their illegal activity, both individuals were criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Stephen Margison to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Stephen Margison to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Dion Lister to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Dion Lister to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Renisha Lee on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On September 28, 2017, Ms. Lee left her 12-year-old son unattended in her vehicle while she gamed at Harrah's, Philadelphia. Ms. Lee's son was discovered when he left Ms. Lee's vehicle, entered Harrah's, and proceeded to the security podium located near the main entrance to the gaming floor. Ms. Lee left her son unattended for approximately 1 hour and 41 minutes. No charges were filed against Ms. Lee. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Ms. Lee on the board's voluntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Proceed.
So this is on the list for 1 year.
Well, the petition is to place her on the exclusion list. The term would be up to the board.
Okay. Is the term 1 year?
That would be left to the discretion of the board.
Well, let me just ask.
Okay, but so I'm.
Let me see if I can help. Who has this motion?
I do.
What is the proposed motion?
Proposed motion would be for a period of 1 year for the consideration of the board and its vote.
I see.
Okay, and then she's removed. Does she automatically get removed or petition?
That would be up to the discretion of the board.
And the proposed motion, should it be adopted by the board, would indicate that she would be removed from the list at that time.
She doesn't have to petition.
That is correct.
So what's the difference between Miss Lee and Miss Winston, where she left 3 children for roughly the same period of time? She's 5 years and gets automatically removed. Miss Lee,
I believe the different.
I mean, whether you leave 1 kid or 3 kids, I mean, I can't get my I can't get my head around this. I mean, I have kids and wouldn't leave them in a car unattended anywhere,
Yeah.
let alone a casino. No offense to
Yeah, well,
parking lots. I just don't understand the difference. It doesn't seem like.
if I could, I can only tell you what the discussion was. The discussion was in the first instance, in this instance, there were no charges filed. In the other instance, there were. And secondly, perhaps you could get some clarification. The age of the child involved in this case was what?
12 years old.
12 years.
12.
That's the difference, Sean.
In the previous, there were a set of twins.
1-year-old twins.
I understand, but okay.
Okay? Those are the facts.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying okay as to proceed. I'm not okay with it. I'll
that's
report
fine.
it as a no.
That's fine. That's fine. Any other comments from the board? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Ronisha Lee to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list for a period of 1 year, at which time she shall be removed from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm opposed, strongly opposed. It's asinine behavior.
It fails.
Okay, hold on a second. Just so we're clear, with that vote, the motion would fail, but that would mean she's not on the list at all.
We
Would you entertain another motion?
I'd entertain another motion if somebody has an idea.
I would just like some consistency. I mean, if Miss Winston was 5 years, I think Miss Lee should be 5 years.
Let me make a suggestion and see what people. How about we table this and revisit it at our next public meeting?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
We made a decision.
Can we do that?
Well,
okay.
Parliamentary wise.
Can I have a motion
To withdraw?
to withdraw our previous decision, the decision we just made?
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman,
I move. Oh, go ahead.
I will make that. Mr. Chairman, I request for the board's consideration a withdrawal of the previous motion and a tabling thereto until the next meeting.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fine, very well. The motion will be, this matter is going to be tabled to our next public session. Thank you.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Jameer Seals on the involuntary exclusion list. On August 28, 2017, Mr. Seals stole $280 in gaming chips from another patron of Play Baccarat at Parks Casino. Afterwards, Mr. Seals fled the property with the chips. The Pennsylvania State Police charged Mr. Seals with unlawful taking and receiving stolen property. Mr. Seals was arrested subsequent to this incident. The charges against Mr. Seals remain pending. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Mr. Seals on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jameer Seals to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. And that concludes today's meeting of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As I mentioned earlier, our next scheduled Category 4 auction will be held on February 21st, 2018 at 10 a.m. in this room. And the next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 7th at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Moved that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.